Hey there, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani. Welcome to Beyond Wellness Radio, where we provide actionable health information on a week-to-week basis that can help you improve your life. Feel free to head over to justinhealth.com, where we have various opt-in video series on more in-depth health topics such as female hormones, thyroid, and gut health. Also, while you're there, feel free and schedule a consult with myself, Dr. J, and or my colleagues. We're available worldwide to provide natural health support for any of your major health issues. Again, welcome to the podcast and enjoy the show. Hey guys, it's Dr. Justin Marcagiani here. I'm with Evan Brand. Today we're going to be chatting about blood sugar issues and the immune system. And of course, we'll connect it to the coronavirus here today as well. We want to make sense of why our immune system may be weak and how we can accelerate it and improve it so we can deal with all kinds of different viruses and infections, including the coronavirus. Evan, how are we doing today, man?
Hey, I'm really excited to chat with you about this. We've been looking at several different charts and graphs. There's just so much stuff to keep up with. There's just so much data that it could even be overwhelming for us, just because we're looking at so many different numbers from so many different places. But one thing that's consistent across the board is we're seeing that people that have comorbidities are ending up in a more critical shape. So specifically, diabetes is second on the list. Heart disease is first on the list. So that's pretty interesting because diabetics are ubiquitous in America, and arguably we're one of the highest diabetes incidents of any country out there.
100%. And there's a phenomenon in our body that our immune system uses. It's called phagocytosis. And phagocytosis involves like our macrophages and monocytes gobbling up viruses. So imagine a Pac-Man or a Pac-Woman, and they are literally just basically grabbing various bacteria and viruses, and it's gobbling it up. Now, when it so basically it gobbles up a virus, it invaginates it, meaning it's like you taking food and you swallowing it. It's now inside of your body, and your body digests it. Your immune cells do the same thing with viruses. And when you have high levels of insulin actually decreases that process. It's kind of like if you're nauseous or sick, you don't want to be swallowing or eating food, right? Therefore, you can't digest the food that you're eating. Well, it's kind of like that with your immune cells. When your immune cells have high levels of insulin, it's going to be harder. Your immune cells will be nauseous to a lot of that bacteria and viruses and won't be able to digest it and break it down. Now, really important because that process is decreased when there's high levels of insulin. Now, insulin helps blood sugar go into your cell. Why does insulin go high? Typically, there's too much carbohydrates and or inflammation. Usually, it's a combination of the two. Of course, more carbohydrates. And insulin's going to go up the more refined and processed the carbohydrates are. And of course, more inflammatory the carbohydrates are. So some people may have a big insulin spike with grains because, one, grains will eventually break down to carbohydrate and glucose in your body, but also the more inflammation the grains cause, especially if you're gluten sensitive, that may create a cortisol spike and immobilize even more sugar, right? So carbohydrates going to bump up your sugar, but your immune response and inflammatory response to it can even increase it even more.
So it sounds like there's multiple mechanisms against you in this aspect, and so you really want to go lower carb right now. It sounds like it's just a smart, protective. I would just say anything you can do to lower risk right now is going to be smart. So that seems like one thing that's pretty low-hanging fruit.
100%. And there have been studies where they look at diabetic patients and they actually lower their insulin levels. I'm trying to see if I can find a good study on this. Here's a wonderful study. Okay, here.
So I'm going to tell you, while you're pulling that up, I'm going to tell you what I saw over the weekend, which was a video from a doctor who had reported that out of, I think it was 23 patients that were in his unit that were in really bad shape, 19 of those were confirmed diabetics. So 19 out of 23 that were in really bad shape, confirmed diabetics. So to me, that's pretty telling. And I'm sure there's bigger numbers out there. That's a pretty small patient group, but still helpful to have that data.
Exactly. Let me go show you guys. So if you guys are listening on the podcast, we also have a YouTube version of this as well where you can see the actual video. So that's important. So if you guys are driving, don't worry. We'll put the YouTube link down below. So if you want to watch the video, you can. I'm going to share my screen, Evan, so you can see. So this is really interesting here. Let me just show you all this. So what they're actually showing here is this. You can see here's the ingestion rate. This is your your neutrophils and or your phagocytosis happening by your macrophages. So this is ingestion. So this is like your immune cells eating stuff. And this is blood glucose. So as you can see, as your blood glucose goes up, what's happening to your white blood cells being able to eat these viruses and bacteria? It's dropping. Do you see that trend there? So you can look here. Let me just kind of draw it out for you guys so you guys can see it and it makes sense. I'm going to make sense of this all. So you can see the general trend is this. It's down. Now, again, these are really high blood sugar ranges, 300, 400, 500. But you can see even at 100, 110, that trend already starts. So let's say your blood sugar only goes to here, like 150, 160. Well, you're still having a decreased immune function, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've had instance where I've taken my blood glucose after doing like rice, for example, and the blood sugar can go up into that range for sure.
Yeah, and the thing is, if you're eating every 4 hours or you're drinking a lot of alcohol or soda, you're constantly jacking your blood sugar up, right? Blood sugar is going up chronically, which is then driving your immune system down. And again, you have to be, kind of more in the diabetic range to get over in these levels, but it's not impossible for someone to go up to 150, 160, 180 acutely after a meal. And then if you're chronically consuming excess carbohydrates, refined sugar, processed grains, you could keep your your blood sugar a little bit low, and that could keep your immune system, if you're at this ingestion rate over here of, let's say, 75 or 80, and you drop it down, let's say, to 65, well, guess what? That's like a 30% drop in your immune function. That may be just enough to get you sick. Does that make sense?
It does. Makes perfect sense.
So,
well, and of course, autoimmune too, right? If you have some autoimmune diabetes stuff going on, I'm sure that's going to play into this. We're talking just stuff that you could easily do and try to help support if you're in the type 2 category, but type 1 would still apply.
Exactly. Yep. And this is, there's a lot of different studies on this that are looking at glucose and immune function. This is pretty common. So it's really important to be able to know there's a connection. And again, a lot of these studies connect it to like diabetes or type 2 diabetes, which is fine, but there's an in-between area between having healthy glucose levels and being diabetic. And a lot of people are in this pre-diabetic, what do we call it? There's starting to be this insulin resistance. It's subclinical. It's not at that 126 milligrams per DL of blood sugar. You may be just chronically above 100, 110. And what does that mean? You may not have a 20 or 30 or 40% immune reduction. You may just have like a 10 or 20%, right? And then that may be enough to get you sick.
Yeah, that all counts though, right? You may say, only
counts.
10% reduction, but I want to do anything I can to build myself up and reduce risk.
110%. So there's a lot of studies on that, and I've talked about it. That's why right now, if you're worried about, coronavirus and other viruses, right, you really want to have your blood sugar under control. So leaning more lower carbohydrate will be helpful. Also, a lot of the inflammasomes that are produced from the immune reaction, right? So when your immune system goes to fight a virus or fight an infection, it produces these inflammasomes. Well, it produces cytokines to go after what's happening, right? And these cytokines create an immune response. And typically there may be lipopolysaccharides that are produced from the infection. And so what happens is these lipopolysaccharides also can create inflammation. And some of the byproducts of the inflammation that are produced are these things called inflammasomes. And they're like inflammatory compounds. And what happens is these things inhibit nitric oxide. And nitric oxide is really, it blocks nitric oxide and it suppresses certain toll-like receptors. So dark pigmented fruits and vegetables are going to block the LPS, or that bad bacterial toxin that activates a lot of those inflammasomes. So doing bioflavonoids, elderberry, lots of high-quality fruit and vegetables, especially lower sugar on the fruit, right? Because we talked about how high sugar stuff can decrease your phagocytes, right? So we want to make sure that we're on top of that and we can decrease a lot of that immune response, right? So the more refined and processed your carbohydrates are, when you make a lot of these cytokines, it's possible that your body is going to have this increased inflammasome activity. So we can really modulate it. So think of a lot of these compounds and bioflavonoids. We talk about like adaptogens for our immune system or adaptogens for our adrenals. This is like adaptogens for like the cytokine response in your body, which is really helpful.
Yeah, and I don't know how powerful that would be, like eating a handful of blueberries versus doing like Japanese knotweed or some of these other cytokine herbs that we've discussed. But to me, it's all on the table at this point.
Yep, exactly. I mean, you're going to eat anyway. You're not going to just, get your calories and your nutrition off of herbs, right? It's just not going to happen. But can you use good herbs and nutrients that are supplemental for the immune system along with, fresh blueberries or really good quality bioflavonoids that are going to be in your vegetables and low sugar fruit? Yeah, I think so. And then, of course, leaning more on the lower carbohydrate side and improving your ketone levels, because ketones, they're going to, keep your immune system, or they're going to keep you satiated. And two, ketones don't have an effect that I'm aware of clinically of decreasing an immune response. And actually, your body tends to increase ketones when you get sick. Let me walk you through that. So when you get sick, what tends to happen? You tend to get more nauseous, right? And then the nausea does what? It prevents you from eating, right? And then what does the eating do? You actually start going into what I call starvation ketosis, meaning you're not getting enough calories, but you're also going into ketosis too. Now that may be more on the severe side, right? Because your body's trying to, not worry about digesting food, it's worrying about digesting bacteria and viruses. Now that's more when you're sick, but what about the in-between? Can you start to push your body a little bit into ketosis so you're starting to do some cellular autophagy and clean up some junk in your body? Yeah. And would the ketones be fueling the weakened immune response like sugar would? No, they won't be. They won't be, right? And we talk sugar. Sugar is typically sucrose. What's sucrose? Usually it's 50% glucose and fructose, or 55-45 if it's high fructose corn syrup, 55 fructose, 45 glucose. So all that gets broken down into the same thing.
Yeah, it's a big metabolic stressor is the key point here. And so any stress in the bucket, we're trying to analyze those. So we've talked about immune stressors. We did a whole podcast on different herbs to try to help calm the nervous system, because that's part of the stress. Now we're talking about the metabolic side of stress. So really, I mean, if you think of this whole thing as a spider web, if we look at someone who's getting critically ill, we're thinking they may have emotional stress in the bucket. They may have metabolic stress in the bucket, the dietary stress. They may not be sleeping well because they're up all night watching TV, for example. So they've got that melatonin cortisol disruption, which is also very impactful on the immune system, because we know melatonin is a super powerful antioxidant. It's one of the most powerful known to man and produced by the body. So to me, if you're trying to look at all the data and you're thinking, okay, what can I do? I think the wise decision is try to look at these puzzle pieces, look at the spider web, and try to systematically approach each of these categories, making sure you're getting to bed on time. Like, I put my little girls down and I go to bed kind of early. I know I go to bed earlier than you, Dr. J. I go to bed like 9:30, 10, at the latest. Sometimes even 9 o'clock. And in the winter when it's dark, I may even go to bed sooner than that. So sleep is foundation one. And then foundation two, getting the dialed in, focusing on your good quality fats to stabilize that blood sugar. We'll still do some carbs and starch, right? Like we'll do rice maybe once a week. We'll do some potatoes maybe once a week. But other than that, it's mainly good meats, good fats, good veggies, nuts and seeds, and then the herbals. Vitamin C is not an herbal, but vitamin C, some extra vitamin D. That stuff is all being used now in New York. You and I were talking about that earlier before we hit record, that they're starting to implement some IV vitamin C into some of these critical care facilities, which I think is a very, very smart idea.
100%. And also with the hydrochloroquinolone protocol with the azithromycin, the Z-Pak, the doctors that are actually doing even better are adding about 230 milligrams of zinc to that protocol. And some that are even doing better are also adding the vitamin C. So again, we always look at the immune function. Drugs are never essential to the immune system, but nutrients are. So that's why leaning to extra zinc or extra vitamin C, let's say your diet's great and you're already getting a lot of those things. That's awesome. But if you do get exposed to something, having more of those nutrients could help your immune system deal with that stress better, especially things like vitamin C, because there's so much research on those at higher levels being very beneficial. And even if you were to get sick, your body's going to blow through those nutrients at a higher level. It's just like, okay, now you're drag racing your car. Well, you're going to go through a lot more gasoline than you would if you were just driving normally, right? So you have to look at how you run in your body. If your body's already sick or you're under immune assault, right? You really got to bump it up even more so you can decrease exposure to the virus.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, and someone who's already stressed too, we know just by looking at organic acids testing, I mean, I would say 95%, maybe your number's a little different, 95% of people that we're testing clinically are showing really low in a lot of nutrients. So amino acids, various nutrients like vitamin C will show up low all the time. So to me, you may say that, oh, this is extra supplementation, but to us, it's kind of just baseline because so many people are deficient. So we're actually implementing those already, even if this weren't going on.
100%. And I see a lot of doctors out there that are throwing a lot of doctors under the bus that are recommending immune nutrients and or immune support. But frankly, there's two differences in care. There's differences where we're working with someone in care and we're testing certain nutrients and we're being more specific and creating a longer term plan. But then there's, even with patients, a palliative approach where we may upregulate our immune system for a more acute response. Like if someone's going to be having more stress, or they're going to be flying on an airplane, or they're going to be around people that are potentially more sick, that's a difference to the protocol. We're going to be having more of a palliative immune boosting acute approach. This isn't more of a long-term program. It's more of an acute response because your body may be under more stress right now. And it's just trying to increase our terrain and our reserves so we can deal with something more specifically. So a lot of people get very dogmatic and want to nuance this and make it more difficult than it is. And of course, different people need different nutrients, but there's also general approaches that we can use across the board to give ourselves a little bit more of a bump across, the population without having to see each person as a patient and test everyone.
Right. I mean, my thought of it is kind of like a road trip. You're not going to start a road trip with a quarter tank of gas. If you know you've got a journey ahead, you don't really know how things are going to end up. Are people close to you going to get affected or not? It's going to be wise to go ahead and fill up the tank with nutrition now. Even if you're someone who has zero concern, zero fear, worst case scenario, something did happen to you, but I think it would be wise to just, it's a prep. It's sort of prepping your body, prepping your immune system, prepping the metabolic system, prepping the nervous system. Like last week, we did a show all about that, different herbs that we love and use to help with the nervous system. All of it counts.
Also, when you get exposed to an infection, your needs go up. So ideally, you're already nutritionally supported in a way where your vitamin A levels are good, your C levels are good, your D levels are good. So when an infection hits you, it literally bounces off you. It can't even gain a foothold into your body, right? We know the coronavirus uses that ACE2 receptor site, and it gains a foothold in. It uses this like filament to drop off the RNA inside the cell, and then it replicates, and then you have an immune response. But if we can even prevent that pesky little mosquito from dipping its nose into that ACE2 receptor site, then that prevents this whole issue from happening. So it's keeping your immune, it's like kind of like, hey, we're going to replace the locks on our door. We're going to maybe put a Ring camera out there. I may put an ADT sign or something to make people feel, hey, we're watching this receptor site, this home a little bit better. And it may prevent someone from even accessing the home or the cell. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a great analogy. I love it.
Yeah, so there's two ways to look at it. Hey, you get sick. How do we have a stronger immune response? But number two is, how do we just prevent that invader from even opening the cell door to begin with? And so we kind of want to look at it from two sides of the coin if we can.
Yeah, and of course you can't sign in blood and say, hey, look, if you do all the right things, you're going to have guaranteed protection. But to me, it makes sense that you could reduce risk. I mean, if we look at, just try to comparatively look at the vitamin D levels in the flu, we know just by looking at the data, you can see in general, lower vitamin D equals increased risk. So the data is there on this. This is not stuff we're just making up on the fly to sell some vitamin D. No, it's there.
Yep, 100%. And also, some patients kind of wrote in here, well, what does fasting help? Well, it depends. If you're sick, fasting can definitely help, but we still want nutrition to come in. I would just lean in maybe on some collagen amino acid smoothie, or maybe even just some bone broth or some gentle soup, because when you are sick, your immune system just kind of doesn't want to work as well because it's mobilizing that energy, right? When you eat food, half of the energy that you take in goes to the digestion process. It's kind of expensive. I use the analogy of using your credit card and having a 50% transaction fee on it. Hey, you buy a $100 pair of shoes, Well, you get a bill of $50 after the fact, right? Well, that's expensive. So if we can break everything down and make it easier on the tummy, or even go a little bit lower calorie for a day or two, but do it in response to your appetite dropping and nausea occurring. If you're not having a whole bunch of nausea or appetite drop, listen to your body, but you can always do a little bit of fasting, but try to make sure if you're not nauseous to get enough nutrition, right? Extra nutrients, potassium, vitamin C, proteins, fats, all that's going to be great. And if you start to feel your appetite going down, you can lean into a little bit more of a fast, but still rely on easy to access nutrition from bone broth or collagen amino acids or some simple smoothies.
Yep, you said it best once on a call, which was that if you said there's no nutrition in starving. So you kind of have to weigh that balance of potential benefits and things getting upregulated, maybe more ketone production versus, hey, I'm just not having the blueberries and all the nutrition. To me, I would still say go 3 meals a day. Maybe you eat dinner at 6 and you don't eat breakfast till 8. That's a 14-hour fast. To me, that's plenty long enough at this point.
Exactly, a lot. Now, again, the less sugar and carbohydrate you actually need less B vitamins and less antioxidants, because the more glucose and glycolysis that your body has to run, it actually requires more vitamins and more magnesium. So your nutritional needs will drop, but if you ain't really getting enough of those nutrients in, you're still going to need some of them. Okay, so getting them in there is important. A lot of the carnivore crew, they don't get a lot of those nutrients, but if you're carnivore, you're also going to be leaning on lots of grass-fed nutrients. And if you're eating healthy quality steaks, there's a lot of bioaccumulated nutrition those animals are going to get from those plants. So it's totally different if you're eating animals that are all grain-based versus ones that are more grass-fed. So if you're going to be leaning more on the keto or even carnivore side, just make sure the animal products are high quality.
Yeah, one thing that some clients have said to me is that of course, they're not glad that stuff is shut down in the city, but I have had some people tell me, hey, now that I'm forced to cook meals at home, it's actually allowing me to get into new paleo cookbooks that I've had sitting on the counter, or try these new recipes for this grass-fed steak, or try, cooking some Brussels sprouts for the first time. So I want to try to, put some positive light into this, that people are with their families, hopefully at home, they're eating more good quality food. When
Correct.
Everything is running normally, people are running out and they just don't think about it. I mean, even when I talk with William Shaw, the head of Great Plains Lab, here he is running a laboratory doing advanced testing, and I get him on the podcast and I'm like, yeah, take us through your diet. And he's like, oh, I eat out for lunch every day. It's like, no, Bill, don't eat out for lunch every day. So I guess you could do Chipotle and other higher quality things, but in general, now people are cooking at home more. So I'm hoping this is really encouraging people to focus on nutrition more. And I think it's been a real big wake-up call for the general population that, hey, our health does matter. And we kind of waited for a crisis to focus on building ourselves up. But obviously, this is not the way I would want it to turn out. But it's interesting now that people are wanting to wake up and think more about the choices they're making on a daily basis. Like, oh, maybe I don't want that alcohol because I know that alcohol is not good for my immune system. People are just starting to care more, which there's got to be some good out of that.
Exactly. And then first thing is, we talked about the immune system and cortisol and stress. So this video, we're not going to go into the stats on what's happening with coronavirus. I'll do a video after this one where I go into the statistics of it. But let me just frame it a different way. All right. When it's all said and done, the mortality rate of this infection is far below 1%, number one. Number two, 90% of people that get this infection are going to be asymptomatic. That means for every 10 people or every one person that gets the infection, 9 out of 10, minimum, maybe even higher. Dr. Shabitz out of Ontario says maybe up to 20 people. So for every one person that gets it, 19 to 20 are going to be asymptomatic. As low as 9 to 10 will be asymptomatic. That means your body got exposed to the virus, it's having an immune response, and you're showing no symptoms. So in other words, there's a 90+% chance that you're asymptomatic. And number two is, if you get sick and you actually have symptoms, 80% of those symptoms are going to be very mild. So in other words, if you kind of look at the 90% chance, right, and then you tail it with the 80% chance if you actually show symptoms, that's a 98 to 99% chance that if you get this virus or get exposed to it, you're going to virtually have very little problems addressing it, and you have a 90% chance that you won't even know you got it. So that's pretty awesome. So when you look at all the hysteria and everything that's happening on TV, you have to know those stats to begin with. And then the first thing I say is, am I doing more than 90% of the population? Or am I doing more than the 10% of the population that's really 10 or 20% out of that population that's getting sick? Am I doing more than 10 to 20% in regards to my immune system and health? And I would say if you're doing the right stuff, you're going to be in that 99% category for sure. Now, you're going to see lots of anecdotes on TV of one-offs of people getting sick. Number one, you don't know their health history. Two, you don't know their diet. You don't know what they eat. You don't know if they have any other pre-existing conditions. You don't know any of that stuff. So the problem is you're not going to have access to a lot of it. And the majority of people are going to be 75 and up and have multiple comorbidities like 99% of people in Italy had. So if you look at it, if I say, oh my God, you have a 1% chance of dying, right? And you're going to feel something. And if I say, oh my God, you have a 99% chance of not even having an issue at all, you also feel something with your body and your mind immune-wise. So let's flip it in our brain and look at it like from the 99% chance. And that's not a 99% chance of living. That's a 99% chance that if you get it, there's no issue at all. It's totally over your head. You don't even know what's going on.
Yeah, and we'll wrap this up, but because I don't want to get too deep into this part. But
the mindset's very important, though.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you. But what I'm going into is different, and I don't want to go off into a tailspin. But one thing that I'm noticing is that the media is focusing a lot on specific naming of people. So this celebrity has it, that celebrity has it, that celebrity has it, and it's almost too as if it's to create, I don't know, more fear, because it's like, oh, I know that person. They think they know that celebrity. If it's patient 367, you're kind of like, oh man, that's bad for them. But if you're like, oh, Tom Hanks, it sort of, I think, creates a more visceral response. But as you mentioned, Tom Hanks has diabetes. I just read an article this morning about him having diabetes or being diabetic. I don't know if he still fits the diagnosis or what. But so as you mentioned just a minute ago, you lose sight of what else is going on with people. So it's really easy to compare and think, I'm a human, they're a human. But if they're diabetic and their diet's not good and they're traveling internationally, I mean, he was in like Australia, I think, traveling however many time zones to film for a movie. You can't compare yourself and your situation to them and think that you're just as vulnerable as them.
100%.
It's just not fair to yourself. It's not fair to yourself to try to say, because that happened, that'll happen to me. Because if you're at home, you're quarantined, you're eating good food, you've got your nutrition on board, your extra supplements on board, to me, I would try not to worry unless there's an urgent need to worry, if that makes sense.
Correct. And then, like you mentioned, when you go into these one-off kind of anecdotes, you lose perspective. And so, like, I always like to give perspective because it gives you a frame of reference to go back to. So this flu season right now, we've had 155 pediatric deaths due to flu. How many of these pediatric deaths have been, let's say, they did a one-off story on that person dying of flu? A 15-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 10-year-old kid dying of flu. You don't hear any of these things with the flu, all right? And that just tells you right now, if we're comparing apples to apples, there is an agenda by the media to hyper-focus on this and to hysterize the issue. If there wasn't an agenda, show me all the photo ops of all the other kids of flu dying. Show me those stories. Okay, they're not there, and the reason why they're not there is because people are trying to create a lot more fear and gin up a lot more fear, and also decrease, the relative risk on other conditions that happen all the time that we live with, and we're very comfortable with it happening, and we know it happens, right? And that's the pediatric flu incidents, 155 dead so far this year.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. I wish I could change things, but I guess all we can do is try to help provide just a little bit of a different perspective than just the headlines, and hopefully that can help people to just get through this. We're all in it together. Unfortunately, everybody's affected globally. We've got clients all around the world. Justin and I work with people in Australia and Canada and Europe, and it's the same there too. So it's not just a U.S. thing now at this point. Everybody's involved. So we hope to just help everybody keep your heads up and keep pushing forward.
And also, with the comparison, I don't want to minimize any of the 155 that died of flu that are pediatrics, that are kids. That's already sad. But just know all the information we're providing today is going to help you from all conditions. It's not like, hey, this supplement's going to just help you for the coronavirus or the flu virus. They're going to improve your immune system, and your immune system will be so much more intelligent and strategic in dealing with all types of immune stressors. So keep that in the back of your head. We don't want to make light of anything, but at the same time, we want to compare people's responses, and those responses reveal the emotional overdrive to get you to feel something more about this versus that.
Yeah, good point about the immune support, right? This podcast will still apply a year from now, even if nothing in the media is like this. This applies all the time. So it just becomes a little more important now that you focus on this stuff. So, I've had some clients too reporting that they're stress eating. I mean, my wife went to Whole Foods, and guess what? All the cookies were sold out. The graham crackers, the cookies, any kind of sweet stuff. You could still get bad food at Whole Foods. It was all sold out. So, even if it's a gluten-free cookie, that still is that blood sugar metabolic stress we talked about in the beginning. So I would say do the best you can to stay dialed in. This is maybe you have a cookie as a treat, but you don't want to go off the rails too much, because remember, that metabolic stress is immune stress, and the immune stress weakens you. We don't want that.
Exactly. And also,
were there any other questions? I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was just going to ask about any questions. I didn't have them pulled up.
Yep. So in general, I'll pull it up here. We want to be on top of our immune system, and we also talk about the reason why the fear is so important is because of the cortisol response. And like you highlighted, that those surges of cortisol will weaken our immune system. And so the reason why I am so on top of it and you're so on top of it is we want to have a strong immune system. And if we can reframe how information's getting exposed to us, like I mentioned, versus the 99% chance of there being no issue at all, even with the infection, then that gets us a lot more hope, and that creates a different immune response.
Yeah, and the cortisol affects the gut, and the gut, a lot of the immune system exists or happens. The immune system activity can happen from good gut health. So that's why you don't want that cortisol damaging that gut barrier. This is why athletes, after too hard of exercise, they may have diarrhea, for example. That cortisol can be damaging on the gut.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. And then I've Barb writes in about being worried about contacting her 95-year-old mother. Yeah. Just remember, just stay that 6 feet. The coronavirus doesn't have wings, so it can't fly. It's an aerosolized droplet that has to make its way over there. So number one, if you're afraid of being asymptomatic, you can always wear a mask, which will decrease the spread out your mouth. And for the most part, you're only going to have a spread if you're coughing. Right? So if you're not coughing and you're not actively sick, you're more than likely fine. You just keep a 6-foot distance, and then just make sure if you're going to interact with someone that could be immune compromised, make sure everything's washed going in there, washed in between. Don't ever touch something. And then if you're dealing with that person who's older, make sure they're washing in between and washing after you leave, and maybe washing down any counters that you may be near as well. Right, but that'd be the biggest thing. And if you're really concerned above and beyond, worst case, you could wear a mask if you're really concerned. But mask really going to matter more if you're healthcare people and you're interacting with people more, or if you are actively coughing or have a cough that you may not be able to control. Right, it's like a cough sometimes, or a sneeze. Right, sometimes that can be hard to control. So if you're in that category where you feel like it could happen, then a mask may be smart if you have to interact with that person. But that 6 feet buffer zone will give you a lot good window. I saw the data. If you live in the same house as a person, you only have a 5% increased chance of contracting. 5%. So it's not that much more. And if you use good practices and you're not sneezing, then it gets even better.
Yeah, I would just say if you're somebody who you're having like tree pollen allergies, since everything's blooming this time of the year right now, then and you're going to be sneezing and you're not sure if you're a carrier, then yeah, I think that mask would be smart.
Yeah, and ideally, if that's the case, I just wouldn't interact. I'd be even further, just to be safe.
That too, until things pass.
Yeah, I've been using a lot of Instacart for my groceries, and that's been really helpful because they drop it off. And a couple things you can do is you can do some of the On Guard or Thieves essential oil, and you can dilute a little bit of that in water and just kind of spray everything. If they drop off your groceries, nothing's really warm in there. You can leave it in the sunlight for like an hour or two, and the fresh air will typically kill any viruses as well. And a lot of times the Instacart people, one, they're wearing masks, and two, they're actually wearing gloves. So they're doing a pretty good job on their protocols for picking stuff up. Instacart's going to be a service that they'll do the grocery shopping for you. So they're doing a pretty good job. But if you want to go the extra mile, that's how you could do it on top of it. I just wouldn't recommend leaving meats or butter or those kind of things out in the sun, obviously for common sense reasons.
Right.
That's it. Anything else you want to highlight, Evan?
No, that's it. Did you have any other questions that popped up that were relevant? If not, we'll wrap it up.
No, I mean, there's a lot of things we could talk about in regards to the immune system and what we could do nutritionally, but we've done other podcasts on that, so I don't want to be a broken record. So take a look, see those other podcasts for the references on what to do to boost your immune system up, and we'll try to put some links down below as well for y'all. All right, Evan, today was great. Hey, if you guys are having immune issues or you want to be more on the preventative side, or you're like, hey, I want to start getting my health better now, what better time than everyone being at home and having a lot more time to start working on these things? So feel free, head over to evanbrand.com. Go reach out to Evan. And then Dr. J, myself at justinhealth.com. Feel free, you can click and schedule. We're happy to help you all out. And again, especially during this time, you don't have to drive to a doctor's office that could be loaded with lots of, flu and other viruses. And this is a great way to start moving forward while you got time.
Absolutely. And we work 100% virtually. We may not mention that every time, but we assume most people figure that out by listening and looking on the website. But yeah, so we send labs to your door. You do those labs. UPS or FedEx picks those up and then returns them back to the lab, and then we jump on a call, Skype, FaceTime, Zoom, whatever. We then review those, and then we make a protocol to get you feeling better. So that's how we work, and we're very blessed and very grateful for the opportunity. And the labs so far have been doing great with turnaround times. We haven't seen any lag or delay. We've got nutrients that we have stocked up on, Justin and I both personally. So we've got supply, which is good. A lot of places are sold out of stuff for immune. So luckily, we kind of thought a little bit ahead of the game here.
Yeah, and let us know. Put your comments down below. If you got the dreaded corona, let me know what you're doing with it. If you got other infections right now or you're feeling sick, let me know your experience. What's working, what's not. And if you're enjoying this stuff, give us a thumbs up. Give us a share. Let your family and friends know. We really appreciate it. We want to empower everyone here.
Last note, I saw that one Chinese study that came out that 80% of people that tested positive, it was a false positive. Mm-hmm. So that's why the testing really makes me scratch my head.
Yeah, I don't love the idea of the testing because it's going to create more numbers, and those more numbers are going to create more hysteria and more panic. And I always tell people more numbers actually mean that the virus is actually weaker, because that means the mortality rate actually drops, right? But I don't like the idea that there's a false positive 50 to 80% of the time. So that's bad. A maximum 80% false positive. I mean, that is humongous. If we just deleted 80% from the numbers of the cases, I mean, that would be unbelievable. How different it would look. And then how I interpret that's a little bit different. How I interpret it is, if you're around people that could be immunocompromised or are going to be older, go through the extra precautions, whether it's you quarantine for them or you go through extra measures like washing hands, which you should be doing anyway, but maybe you do gloves. Maybe you want to do a mask that you recycle just to be extra careful. I'm fine with that. Just pretend like you already have it, and more for the immunocompromised, more for the elderly. But get sunlight, get some fresh air. If you can leave your house and you're not in like New York City where things are congested, go in your backyard, get some fresh air, get some walk, get some vitamin D. All that stuff's going to be great. Don't be cooped up inside unless you're of that population risk factor and you're in a part of the country where you have to be. Everyone's going to do better getting that fresh air and vitamin D.
Yep, and we're running our air purifiers like always too, so this would be another good time. If you don't have air purification, you are trapped inside, air purifiers are a good strategy, so we could put some links for that as well. We've got a couple of recommendations. And
our air purifiers that we're recommending will filter out viruses, so if you're in that area and you're in someone's home, right, crank up that air purifier. That way it's going to clean everything out and less chance of getting more exposure. But again, risk factors are going to be pretty low if you're doing all the right things.
Yep.
All right,
awesome.
Evan.
Well, check out the websites if you need help. Once again, Dr. J at justinhealth.com, me at evanbrand.com. We'll be in touch. You all take care.
Excellent, everyone. You guys have a good one. Stay safe. Peace.
Bye-bye.
Got a question for Dr. J? Go to beyondwellnessradio.com and click the questions button. Then tune in to hear the answer. Also, if you like the show, click below to review us on iTunes. For more Beyond Wellness Radio, go to beyondwellnessradio.com.